What's up guys? Today I'm going to be talking about reviewing, swatching, and showing you a few looks I created using the new Wet n Wild 40 Pan eyeshadow palette. I'm going to be doing all those things in a slightly different format than usual because I'm pretty late to this game. The brand just sent this to me about 2 weeks ago, but it launched like months ago at this point. So rather than getting down into the ultra nitty gritty, I'm just going to give you the 4 things I think you need to know if you are considering purchasing this. So let's go ahead and get started. Number 1, this palette, not without its controversy. The layout is super similar to the James Charles Morphe palette, which if you follow any sort of makeup news, you probably already know and have been following. I do not have the James Charles Morphe collaboration, so I can't speak to a comparison of the shadow shades or quality, but here is what I know. And obviously having used this for the past few weeks and in looking online at the swatches of the James Charles palette, I can definitely agree that the visual organization of the shadows is spot on. Like they have taken the lighter neutrals down here and then gone into the deeper neutrals over here, tealy blue, greens, blues down here, purples over here in this corner. That is totally the case. But when I got closer into looking more at the swatches on like Ulta's website of the James Charles palette, I saw what I think are some differences. Like sure, the staple matte neutral shades, the primary red, yellow, blue are pretty much the same, but there are some differences in say, like I don't think you get a very shimmery orange like you do here. You can see that gold flashback. This is a very shimmery orange and then a matte kind of corally here. Over here where we have two teals in the Wet n Wild palette are more light blues or what look to be like lighter versions of these primary blues down here as opposed to the greens over here. There are like less greens in the James Charles palette. And then some of the Wet n Wild shimmery shades have a little bit more of a duochrome like this one right here, which is soft lilac with a soft blue shift. Subtle differences like that. And so while it seems to me that there is definitely a lot of similarity in the shadow arrangement, I don't know that this is any more a copycat or a dupe of that palette than something that Makeup Revolution has come out with to exactly copy something high-end like from Pat McGrath or Natasha Denona, things like that where it's pretty much meant to be a dupe of somebody else's product and brand. I think that this Wet n Wild palette does that kind of to a lesser degree. You know what I mean? So whatever you take from that, whether you were interested in the controversy or whether you might already have that James Charles palette and are just thinking like, oh, I kind of like this. Do I really need it? There are definitely some different shadows in here that I think you could reach for that aren't in that palette if you don't already have them in another palette. Point number 2. This is more than a rainbow palette, and a lot of the chatter that I saw going on social media regarding these two palettes and some people saying, you know, you can't copyright a rainbow palette or rainbow palettes have been done before, I was kind of surprised that people are calling it a rainbow palette. Yes, it is very colorful, but when you break it down, if you took these 2 bottom rows away, like less than half the palette, you realize that more than half the palette is kind of mostly neutrals. And that's nice because it means you have neutrals that have, you know, warm bases here, cooler rosy bases up here, softer golden tones over here, but there's a lot of neutrals in this palette. And then you have your sections of pinky purples, bluesy greens, and then like I think a true rainbow palette would have expanded more on, say, the red section up here. There'd be more like variations of oranges, a lighter creamsicle, a deeper burnt orange shade maybe, or even more on the yellows. Like you have one yellow shade in this palette, and to me, a rainbow palette would have just been like an explosion of nothing but maybe more editorial shades as opposed to this, which has a good amount of neutrals. And I make this point just to point out that if you're looking at this thinking, I just don't know how much wear I'm gonna get out of a palette like this, I would look at it on the flip side. Like this could actually stand in as a great everyday neutral palette that maybe you only reach for a soft accent of color on your outer corner or your lower lash line or that soft pop of shimmer in the center of your lid if and when you feel like it's appropriate. But literally every other day you can use this for all of your neutral needs as well. Like I think this could be an excellent everyday palette too. Maybe not so travel friendly because it's ginormous, but definitely could see it happening every day, which is not what comes to mind when I hear rainbow palette, you know? Point number 3, the shimmers are kind of disappointing. Not all of them, but like so many of the shades that I was excited about looking at them in the pan and swatching them, they're a little disappointing. I'm talking specifically about, like you look at shades down here, hopefully you'll be able to see this when I actually do swatches and the looks, but like this beautiful duochrome that I pointed out earlier here, and this shimmer over here on the end, which is like a soft frosty pink with a light blue shimmer, and then some like this deep emerald green over here. I thought they were going to be beautiful, rich color pigmented payoff across the lid, especially when I'm using brushes that I typically would to pack them on my lid, using primer, wetting them, doing everything in my power to get these to look the way they do on the pan, on my eyelid, and just nothing worked with them. Different story with the neutrals. You know, some of these up here were very easy to work with, but I feel like these I have more of, or something closer to already in my collection, whereas these standout, you know, duochromatic, multifaceted shades down here are what I was really hoping would kind of differentiate this palette and make it shine against a lot of the other palettes that I might have. And I mean, and even against the shimmers that I have in my like normal color icon, the older color icon formula from Wet n Wild, these might feel a little bit less finely milled, like a little more coarse when applied, but I think have so much more pigment than these from Wet n Wild. These feel a lot smoother, but I prefer more pigment over a smoother shadow, you know what I mean? Just in terms of ease of use and color payoff. Oh, and that reminds me, Wet n Wild also sent me the metallic palette. I think that is what this is called. It doesn't have a name on it, but it's this guy right here, also new. And it is nothing but, they say metallic shadows, I would say high shine shimmery shades. Very similar formula to the shimmers in the 40 palette. Equally as smooth, and in some cases, similarly poor color payoff. So I don't know if these are meant to be kind of light shimmer oversprays across the eye, or if they are just truly kind of lacking in pigmentation, but I just did notice that similarity across these two. But ending the video here on a high note, point number 4 is that the matte shadows in this palette are incredible. Like each and every single color in here, whether it's neutral, more colorful, they're awesome. And I feel like I used to say all the time, like finding a good matte shadow was like a diamond in the rough. And lately, within the past few years, with like the explosion of the cosmetic industry, people have really been stepping up their game with their formulas. Brands have been coming out with new formulas, but I still think it's always nice, especially at a price point like this, to find a good matte shadow, one that is super smooth, not chalky, doesn't drag or skip across the lid. These check all those boxes, and they do it in a wide variety of shades. And so I would say at this price point, if all you wanted to use were the matte shades in here, I would say it's a good deal, especially considering, like I said before, not all the shimmers are the worst, just mostly those that I had the highest hopes for in terms of like a unique finish. But I think the mattes are the real star of the show in here. For instance, like the look I'm wearing here today, I didn't wear a primer. I used the primary yellow shade in here, which is like one of the most notorious for being chalky and just nasty as a shadow. It was beautiful. And then I also popped the matte coral color here up into my crease to kind of deepen it up, and it's just like so stinking pigmented without a primer. So then imagine that with a primer, or using them a little bit dampened on your brush, and just the color payoff is incredible with these. So those are my 4 things about this palette. I hope they were helpful if you were still considering, on the fence, maybe getting it, maybe not. Also, a really great Christmas present. If you find that you have someone in your life who's like kind of getting into makeup, they love the idea of playing with more colorful things, but also still want those great neutral standbys, like this is an amazing pick and at a really great price point, I think. So those are my 2 cents on this palette. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye guys.